Good afternoon. I'm Joe Reingold, and I'm here with Joe Zeffren. Today is April 10th, 2023. Hello, Joe. Good afternoon.
Hello, Joe. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about what you know of your grandparents and your parents, where they lived, where they grew up, and what they did for a living, etc.
Okay, well, my father's parents died before he even met my mother, so I only know their names and a story or two about them. Their names were Joseph and Caroline Cranston. I am named after my grandfather, so my name is Josephine Lois, and they wanted Joseph Lazarus, but they got Josephine Lois. And my father's family, interestingly enough, they lived in Natchez, Louisiana, and my grandfather had a saddle and dry goods store, and then he had a cotton gin, and then because Natchez, Louisiana was a very tiny town, the children had to go over to Marshall, Texas. So many of my family graduated from the high school in Marshall, Texas. And Caroline had 10 children, I believe. She lost 3 boys when they were younger than 5. And a 4th boy died in the influenza of 1918. And so 6 of them grew up and had families. And so my father's family was basically, I used to go to Marshall, Texas when I was little on the train and visit the family. And when my grandparents were elderly, older, they both moved to St. Louis. My father bought them a house and took care of them until they died in the 1930s. My mother's family...
Let me ask, why did they pick St. Louis? Do you know?
Yes. So the oldest child, practically the oldest child, was a woman named Honor. She really wasn't Honor. I am positive, since all the men were named Sam and Harry and Bernard and whatever, and that when they took her to school, my grandmother must have said her name is Anna. Mm-hmm. And the teacher did not know Anna, and she changed it to Honor, because there is no way that this child was named Honor. But she grew up with that name. When Honor got married, she married a man, and they went to St. Louis, and he became a pharmacist. Every boy then graduated, went to St. Louis, and became a pharmacist. So I had, my Uncle Harry was a pharmacist, my Uncle Rich was a pharmacist, my dad was a pharmacist, and they had drugstores in St. Louis. And my father did not. He had a financial part of each drugstore, but he went on the road, and he was a salesman for one of the drug companies in those days, and that's what he did. So he was a traveling salesman. He was so good at his job that when people go on the road from Monday to Friday, my father only had to go on the road from Tuesday to Thursday, and they called him the TNT man, and that story comes from my mother, because my father died when I was 4. So counting the time he was on the road, my sister and I figured out that we probably only knew him for a year of our lives. So I don't have any memories except from photographs and maybe a little bit of a movie. So to get back to my mother's family, her father is Meyer and her mother was Ethel. And their last name is Wasserman, and there's many here, but we're not related to any of them. But we're sure we are.
Right.
So they came over from Lithuania, same area as my father's family. And my grandfather, I think, was a carpenter and worked with his hands. And when he came to America, that didn't work out. And so he had many, many jobs and whatever he could do. I think they had a grocery store for a little while, and then he ended up having paper routes. And so they ended up in St. Louis because of a relative, Nat Cohen, and he was doing well, and they finally settled there. They went back and forth between Boston and St. Louis, but because of Nat Cohen, the cousin, they stayed in St. Louis. And my mother, the Wassermans had 5 kids, and my mother was in the middle. And my Uncle Lou was a good son and went to work in the paper business with his father. And Nathan, the second son, would stand there and read the newspaper instead of selling it. And so they didn't know what to do with him, so they sent him to college. And he is the only one in of those 5. And he went and became a civil engineer. And so that is my mother's family. Her youngest brother was Jackie, Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack never got married. He was in World War II. I think he was jilted. And he came back, and, you know, he kind of ended up doing fine, but he never married. He had a girlfriend in Florida. She didn't want to move to St. Louis. He didn't want to take his real estate business to Florida, and so he never married. But when my father died, Uncle Jack came to live with us because Grandma had died also. My mother lost her mother, her father, and her husband within 3 years, 4 years. It was terrible. My mother is a very strong woman. So anyway, Uncle Jackie came to live with us, and so he was my surrogate father. My father's brother, Uncle Rich, also took on that role as a surrogate father. And his drugstore, whenever any of us got sick, he would send up medicine and then all kinds of games and coloring books and things. And I never paid for school supplies because Uncle Rich gave us all our school supplies from the drugstore. So my mother was only married 7 years. Then my dad died of a heart attack. And my mother raised the 3 of us with the help of the village, the family village.
Takes a village.
Yes, it does. And my dad had bought a beautiful home in a very, very upscale neighborhood in University City called the University City Hills. And everybody told my mother, Edith, you have to sell the house. And my mother said, no, Bernie bought me that house and I'm keeping it. So she did, and I was raised in that home, just thinking that we didn't have enough money for bread, but we had this wonderful, beautiful home. And my mom took job after job after job, and Uncle Jack, I know, helped pay the taxes. And I know that Uncle Lou gave my mom money under the table, and I know that Uncle Rich did the same and gave us so much. In those days, I was a product of the 50s. In those days, people would give hand-me-downs much more, I think, even now than they do. And I never even had my own coat until I went to college. I was always wearing someone else's winter coat. My sister and I had 1.5 wardrobes, and we shared all our clothes, and every skirt had a pin in it because I had to tighten the waist a little bit more. And I used to yell at my sister, don't throw that on the floor, I have to wear it and it can't get wrinkled. And my mother would say, can't you girls be good friends like Annie and me, her sister, my beloved Aunt Annie. And sure enough, we grew up and were best friends. So that is my mother's family and my father's family, and all of them were there for my mother in many, many ways, giving us rides, taking my mother grocery shopping, and somehow we survived.
So what were your high school years like there?
Okay, so we went because of the neighborhood. I was in a very elite grade school. It was next to Washington University, and many of the professors sent their kids because they lived in that neighborhood. Many of my friends' parents worked at Washington University. University City was an extremely avant-garde school system, extremely. One example is we had sex education in the 6th grade. Another example is every child went to sleepaway camp for a week. The 6th grade closed for a week, and we went to a camp, and everybody experienced overnight camp. So it was an amazing school system. I walked to grade school. I walked to junior high. I walked to high school. And I even walked to Washington University. But while I was in high school, again, it was very avant-garde. I think 80% were Jewish, maybe not 80%, but it was an extremely high Jewish population, and almost everyone went on to college. They probably shouldn't have. They should have had a better after-school program for kids who didn't want to go to school, but further their education. But I loved high school. It was a lot of fun. I had non-Jewish friends, and we would invite them over to decorate for Hanukkah and have a Hanukkah party, and then they would let us decorate their Christmas tree. And I think everybody got along very, very well. When I was in high school, they had a very magnificent after-school sports program, and so you didn't have to be on the varsity team. You could just go out after school, and in the fall you played soccer, and then you played basketball, and then you played baseball, and you just got physical education every single day, and then you'd come home about 4:30 or 5 and do your homework. I was active in the choir. I was not good enough to be in, or I was too shy to be in the elite choir, but I was in the regular choir, and I was president of the choir my senior year. And while I was at U City High School, I met Jerry Zeffren, and we started dating by the time I was still 15, I think. Anyway, and we dated on and off all the way through high school and college, and got married.
Right after college?
Right at the last year of college. He was a year ahead of me. And so I loved my high school years. The school is so close still that we still had, we already had our 60th reunion.
Wow.
And everybody shows up. Everybody, it's like you never were away from them. And to this day, Jerry's class, which I know many in his class, his people, his friends, and we still get together and vacation together, and we Zoom every other Sunday. And so we're all in close touch.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What did you study in college?
So when I went to Washington U, I kind of just fell into it. I knew we couldn't afford to go anywhere, and I knew I had to have jobs, and I just applied like you would go to the grocery store. And I got a note that said I got in. I never even checked anything. And then when it came time for financial forms, I remember sitting at the breakfast room table with my mom, and we filled them out, and somehow I got half scholarship or whatever. And in those days, that meant you needed $250 to go. So it was doable. For a widow, my mother was able to send all 3 kids to college. So my sister went to Washington U, I went to Washington U, and my brother went to one of the Missouri University schools. So I didn't know what I wanted to be. I remember saying, thank God I'm not a man, because I don't know what I would do for a living. I just didn't know. And so when you had to declare a major, I looked at my highest grade, which was English.
Yeah.
And that is why I was an English major, and of course a secondary degree in education. And I got my, license. But meanwhile, I knew I wouldn't be a phenomenal English teacher because I cannot remember the names of authors and the books. I can tell you the whole story, but I can't remember who wrote that book. I knew I wasn't going to be great at it. Meanwhile, I met Jerry, we got married. I was pregnant, and I said, you know what, Jerry, you have a good job, and I'm just going to stay home with the baby. And I taught Sunday school. And in those days, you could teach 2 sessions on Sunday and 1 on Saturday. I mean, the school was a Reformed congregation and the biggest around. And so I taught Sunday school. And not after, but before, while I was in college, I worked at Famous and Bar, and I also babysat. So I had these 3 little cobbled jobs, and so I was able to survive. And then when Jerry and I got married, we were fortunate enough to live during the time when a wife did not have to work. And since I didn't know what I wanted to do anyway, I was very happy to be at home. And we had Bernie, and then we had Stevie, and then we had Susie. And so that was, and then once in a while I had these weird jobs, like there was a grant that Washington U got where they were experimenting to see if you could grade papers. An outsider would grade English papers so that the person wouldn't be influenced by who the kid was who wrote the essay. And I did that for several years and made a discovery, which was the night school students at Washington U were not very good writers compared with the regular students from U City High School. But anyway, so I did those kind of things. And so what have I covered so far?
That's
what do you
good.
want?
Did you and Jerry join any organizations or a synagogue in the early years?
Yes, right away. Because my sister Melanie and I both had been teaching Sunday school at Sharemuth since we were in junior high and high school. Sharemuth Temple had a program where they would pay you to be an assistant teacher. And so when I was in college and high school and college, I got paid a pittance, but it was money, to come to Sunday school, and I was the assistant to a teacher, and you were trained how to teach by watching different teachers. And I also was the assistant to the art teacher. And that was one of the finest educations I ever got, because she was a World War II person, and she saved everything, and nothing was wasted. And I learned a lot from her about cleaning your supplies the minute your project is over and putting them away in the right place so that you would be ready immediately for the next time you needed those supplies. Mrs. Chrysler. She was phenomenal. So Jerry and I, because Melanie and I, my sister, were connected to Sharamouth so strongly, and Jerry got a job singing as the paid tenor in the choir, then we just connected with the Reformed congregation Sharamouth, and they also set up a junior congregation to train young leaders, and they called it YAC, Young Adult Congregation. So we immediately joined YAC, and all of us had offices, and either we were the secretary or I think Jerry might have been president, I don't remember, but we were active in YAC. And then as your kids started using the school, you did have to be a part of the main congregation. So our children started Sunday school there. And then we moved to Dallas.
Okay, that's the next chapter.
Yes.
How and why did you decide to come here?
Yes. Well, Jerry was working for Cerro Copper and Brass on the east side in Illinois, and he realized that they were promoting relatives over him. So he decided there wasn't much of a future, and he began to look for a job. And an opening came up in Dallas, and Bert Romberg called Jerry and said, "Would you like to come interview?" And Jerry said, "I'm looking." So he went to interview, and I know Jerry will tell this story because it's great. But when he left St. Louis, it was freezing and dreary, and he got to Dallas in January, and the sun was shining, and it was gorgeous. And he called up and he said, "I don't care what they offer me, we're moving here." And so
that's it. Love at first sight.
And I said, "No, we can't move to Dallas. They shot Kennedy." And I was very anxious about that. But the job offer was there, and we needed to take it, and so we moved to Dallas. And it was obviously the best move we ever made.
So what was Dallas like in the early days when you first came here?
Well, the first thing that happened...
How long have you been here, first of all?
So, 47. We came in 1976.
Okay.
And we did not find a good fit at that time in the Reform movement, and therefore we joined Sheriff, because Jerry had been raised as a conservative Jew, and I had been in a conservative youth group with him, so I could hang out with him. So I understood conservative Judaism, and so that was the biggest change that happened in our lives, is we went from Reformed Jews to conservative Jews, and we made that transition smoothly. Bernie came home and said, conservative Jews are supposed to keep kosher. And so we readjusted our lives there, and Stephen, our middle son, had learned Hebrew. Bernie was ready for his bar mitzvah. And we just went back to St. Louis, had his bar mitzvah, and Stephen had his bar mitzvah here in Dallas, and Susie had her bat mitzvah here. But when we came to Dallas, we realized a lot of things. Our daughter Susie said, "I know we're in a foreign land." And I said, "What do you mean?" She was in kindergarten.
Oh.
She said, "I know we're in a foreign country because, these people say y'all and we say you guys." So, we saw the differences right away, but we did okay. I wasn't sure about the school system. We had come from a fully integrated school system, and I did not know if our schools had suffered because of that compared to Dallas. And we were in the Richardson school system. And I quickly learned that, on the contrary, we were far ahead of them, and that Bernie he went, and we had to put him and then Stephen into advanced classes. But it took me about 6 months to
Figure
figure that one out. But Dallas, we knew that there was no Italian food. So we switched to Tex-Mex, which we adored. And I went to go make some French onion soup for a luncheon I was having, and I could not find French bread. Nowhere. They did not have a bakery that I could find that made thick, heavy French bread. And I swear to you, I baked my own. And it was such work. I said, I will never make a baguette again. But, so it took us a long time. Chinese food was not of a high quality. So the restaurants were weird. The shopping was okay. And, you know, we adjusted and it was fine. Little by little, the city grew. And as the city grew, I could find my way there. So when my sister came and visited, she said, how do you know the way to the mall and all these stores? And I said, well, it wasn't here when I came, and I watched it being built, and then I learned my way. And the other thing is, because we lived in zip code 48, I could go all the way down and visit people south of Northwest Highway with comfort, and I could go all the way out to not to Renner, but eventually it became a Legacy easily. So I could travel both ways and not feel restricted at all. But I had other friends who were like afraid to go south of LBJ. And people south of LBJ would not go north into Plano, but because we were in the middle, it was perfect. So I was really comfortable going all over them.
As the city grew, you grew, right?
Yes.
So speaking of growing, what else did you and Jerry, or you and the kids, get involved in while you were here? What kind, Jewish or civic activities?
Well, you know, the minute we came here, soccer was the big thing. And so, of course, you know, we put the kids into soccer, and Stevie would stand there and look at the airplanes go by, and the coach said to me, Joe, are you making Stevie play soccer? And I said, no, he loves the uniform and the soda after the practice. So, you know, the boys didn't stick with sports very much. Susie loved sports, but she had tendinitis, which is a doctor's word for her joints are so loose that they're painful. And so she had to quit running. And so that she would do it in spurts, but she couldn't do too much. And so we did sports as much as we could. We joined Sheriff, but 2 years later Beth Torah got a rabbi, and so we joined Beth Torah, and we have never looked back. And we adore Beth Torah, and it's been our home. Our home.
And you've made wonderful friends there.
Yes. Yes, we have a huge community there, and both Jerry was president, and I was on the board many times, and just active in every phase of the congregation, and we still love it.
Can you think of something that you're very proud of, an achievement that you've made in your life?
Well, I'm not sure. I think a lot of times you don't know how you influence people. And so I did work at the JCC for about 12 to 15 years. When I started out, I was in membership. And you never know how you influence people when you're interviewing them or talking to them or getting them acclimated to Dallas. So I will tell you that when I moved here, I met someone who said, oh, I knew you 39 years ago. And I said, wait a minute, how do you know? And he said, well, you worked at the J and you made me go to a party, and that's where I met my wife. So yeah, I had no clue that when I said to him, you have to go to that singles party, that he did. And then he met Barbara and they got married. So And then I worked with the seniors, and I think one of the things I'm proudest of that Miriam spearheaded, but it was in my area, was the federal food program, that the hot lunch program and that kosher kitchen, that started with Miriam Creamer and me.
And that's still going strong.
And it's still going strong.
Right.
And that was something that Miriam insisted that we would introduce to the community. And she said to Karen, who was the head of the J, she said, I can't do this, I need an assistant. And so I switched over, and the food program was one of my specialties.
Certainly wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you think of anybody, well, maybe it's Miriam, but can you think of anyone who you would consider a role model?
Well, I think a lot of Hadassah women were my role model. I mean, I always had joined Hadassah when I was first married, and we lived upstairs in a duplex, and my downstairs neighbor said, come on, I'm taking you to a Hadassah meeting. So I joined Hadassah when I was 22, I think, or 23. And I knew about Hadassah leaders and Henrietta Zold, and if anybody asked me, I would say, oh, Henrietta Zold is my absolute idol, and what she accomplished in her life. And then whenever I would listen to the leadership in Hadassah, I would say, when I grow up, I want to be that smart, and I want to be that learned and that vocal. And I still haven't gotten there yet.
I disagree with that, but okay.
Okay.
A lot of people look up to you also.
Well, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, you were very involved in Hadassah. Is there anything else you can think of you were equally or as involved in?
Well, Beth Torah and Hadassah, and here at the Legacy, I enjoy all the activities and taking part. And
What brought you here, where you're living now?
okay. When I was 19 and I was a camp counselor, I fell through the dock and hurt my left hip. Never went to the doctor, never went to the hospital, but I could tell that as I was growing older, the left hip was affected. And then years and years later, after it began to get really bad, and I had bone-on-bone arthritis, and I just couldn't cope anymore. And so one day after I made the famous lasagna, it took me all day long, and I was so tired I had to go to bed, and I just said to Jerry, I can't do this anymore. He, it was COVID, he was doing all the shopping, I couldn't walk in a store, and we just decided we would move here while we still had our mental faculties and could enjoy it. Luckily, I had my hip replaced, and I'm doing much better, and so we're having a very good time. We love it here, just love it.
And you're already making wonderful new friends and
Well,
activities.
it's so easy here.
Yes,
It is
yes.
so easy.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know your family has grown tremendously. I didn't ask. So where are your grandkids? Where's everybody?
So our eldest, Bernie, married a St. Louis girl, which then influences us going back to St. Louis because there's reason for her to go to St. Louis and for Bernie to go to St. Louis. So St. Louis is still a hub for us. My sister and brother still live there. So Bernie married Lisa, and they have 3 children, Hannah, Carly, and Josh. And Bernie and Lisa downsized and live in a 55-plus community because they're empty nesters.
Oh.
And so Hannah is an engineer. Carly is an itinerant farm worker at the moment, learning to be an organic farmer. She's interested in ecology. And Josh is at the University of Florida. And then Stephen became a computer guy and then a watchmaker. And he works for Chanel. And he heads up their repair department and lives in Brooklyn. He got married 4 years ago, and we have a wonderful daughter-in-law, and she has a daughter, and Sophie is a genius and just spectacular. So Anya and Sophie joined our family 4 years ago. And then Susie was a very active young Judean, went to all the camps for young Judean and to Tel Yehuda on year course, and had a phenomenal support group of young Judeans. And she moved to Los Angeles, met Ron Roush and married Ron, and they had 2 kids, Shira and Eden. And then Susie got breast cancer, and it's the bad kind, and she passed away 9 years ago, and that's the worst.
Yeah.
But the girls are okay.
Do they stay in California?
They stayed in California. Ron would not move them.
Okay.
And Ron's mother, my Makatanista, Ruth Roush, would not leave, and she stayed to make sure that they were okay. So Shira is now a freshman at the University of Santa Cruz, and Eden is in a Jewish day school in about the 10th grade. So they're both doing very well, and Ron is doing well, and so we are thrilled.
Very good. I
Yeah.
hope you get to see them every once in a while.
Well, you know, that story, all my money goes to UT or whatever. We used to say all our money goes to American Airlines or Southwest Airlines, because for years that's all we did. We either flew to Brooklyn or New York, or we flew down to Florida, and we flew to LA, and we just kept going. And now I said to Jerry, I think it's their turn, and they're going to have to start coming here a little bit more, because they rarely did. It was always Jerry and me traveling there. You know, we were in very close contact with all 3 families, and so it's been good.
Wonderful.
It's been good.
Well, I hope everyone continues to flourish and do well this year, and
well.
we thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to talk to your husband.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.